colour, positioning, where you stand, where you sit, what clothes you're wearing, what colour you wear, the colour of your presentation, your background, the text, the font, the size. All these things are important. There's a massive psychology behind, which way should you walk around the supermarket? Many studies have found that if you're in a grocery store, that if you walk anti-clockwise, you will buy more. They also play music at a specific beat to make you walk at a certain pace. There's massive amounts of this psychological, Pavlovian training happening all the time. And it's even better if you're aware of it, so you can make it work for you. Now, it's not to say that you should use these powers for evil. Always use these skills for good. And it's not to say that that without these skills that you'll never sell. These are things that help elevate good to great. All right? You can win without this, but they just make things a little bit easier. So certainly in the Western world, we associate right with good and left with bad. Now, I don't mean politically, but in terms of where you stand. So if I'm speaking from stage, and whether it's like on a stage or at the front of a room or whatever, and I'm wanting to emphasize a good point, I might be talking about our product or solution or some positive point that I want to reinforce, I will stand to the audience's right. Once I start talking about a competitor or a negative or something that I want to reinforce as bad, like pain, I will stand on the left. Now that's just because of the way that we process things, that our brain associates, spatial positioning. Other things, if you notice a lot of advertising, certainly in political advertising, but if you look at many presentations and flyers and white papers, etc., you'll often see some form of visual guide from left to right. Now, often it's not as blatant as arrows. It might be diagonals on the corners of a PowerPoint presentation. It might be some form of texture that just a gradient that leads you to view or take your eye path from left to right. So these are little subtle things that can make a difference. It's in a meeting, you should sit to the right of the decision maker, the most important person in the room. It's just naturally they feel that affinity. That's their right-hand man. And that's where that phrase came from. So these are little things that can really help. It's the same as when you are presenting something. Always be aware of the surroundings in the room. What size the room is, the lighting, how it's being projected. Is it on a screen, a projector? Is it backlit? All those sort of things. They're just common sense. But are you viewing something on a monitor? Are you viewing something that's up on a wall? Something that you've probably never noticed unless you knew this. But white is a terrible background for big presentations because it's bright. And this kind of makes sense. It's common sense, right? That what color are torches and headlights? White. What color are we now making headlights so that they're not so bright in your eyes? Blue, right? This bright white, it slows down the number of times that your eyes blink and it dries out your eyes, and you actually feel physical pain as you're standing there or sitting there staring. And if you're aware of this and you watch it like a conference and the slide changes and there's that momentary flick between one slide and the next, often you'll see people sit back and hear this audible sigh, and you'll see people's eyes start to blink. Once you know this, once it's seen, it cannot be unseen. So this is why in most of your presentations, not all, there are sometimes you want to do this, but you want some form of darker color. Now, something that's not white. It could still be grey, right? Darker, not necessarily dark. The other interesting thing about white as a background is that it constantly draws the viewer's attention back to the slide, even after they have comprehended whatever the message is. Now, most of the time when you're speaking, the slide is a guide. It's not the entire message. It's likely even just a prompt. What you want is the attention on the speaker, not the wall. And so your message is lost and diluted and made less impactful and effective when you've got this bright white screen. And it's the same thing when you're trying to frame, say, images or diagrams or charts. Right? You can use this to your advantage, right? When you want, bang, pay attention here. But most of the time, that's not the case. Now, an interesting tidbit, that the ideal, and you'll notice this at like big events, right? It's a darkened room, like a theatre, like at a movie cinema, or like those big like conference centres where, you know, there's the big stage and then there's the big screens. Often they'll be slightly curved, you know, to help the audience see and get an aspect and a depth, that it's black and it's borderless, because it gives you this impression of vastness, of scale, and without borders, right? So if you can achieve that, like, that's super powerful, but not always appropriate or achievable or possible. So these little things, and it's like what color clothes you wear, right? Blue is very calming and disarming, and it's very agreeable. That's why oftentimes in important meetings I'll wear a blue suit. Similarly, I remember like one particular interview that it sealed the deal for me getting this job. And I was wearing this, you know, suit that had this, you know, subtle two-stripe of slight pink in the brown. I was wearing a white shirt, you know, bright pink tie, bright pink socks. I was like Mr. Pink. And I got the job, and I went, and this was with the general manager and of the organisation. And when I started and I caught up with him, he's like, Andrew, what's with the pink? It's very bright. Right? Well, that's why. You remembered me. Right? Sometimes all you want is to be memorable. Right? You can use all the psychological colour techniques that you want, but if they don't remember you, does it really matter? So, like, there's no one rule for all of this, right? Some people respond differently, but there are some things that you can do to help make your case, to either make yourself memorable or seem bigger than you are or smaller than you are, or change your stature or your authority in the room. Like, people naturally defer to you, or maybe you don't want that. Maybe you want to be the silent person at the back that just observes and is forgotten, right? There are things that you can do, right? These are powerful. Do not misuse them. Use these powers for good. With great power comes great responsibility. You'll notice that I have Batman. Spiderman's rubbish, but that's a good tip, right? So, these are little things, but they are impactful. And they're not going to make the outcome. They're not going to be the thing that solves your sales problems, right? There are vastly more important things. But they can elevate you from good to great, or from great to spectacular. Like, these are the next steps. These are advanced techniques. So, use this power for good. Stand on the right for good, left on the bad. You wear the right colours for whatever it is you want to achieve, and be smart about your presentations. Thank you.